What's up, everybody? I'm here with the great Dr. Mike T. Nelson, one of the smartest people in the world. And so
John doesn't know many people, so it's okay.
That's right. So Dr. Mike is going to help us. He's an expert in nutrition physiology. I'll let him kind of talk for a second, but he's going to help us with some just health, lifestyle, nutrition, things to think about during this time of social distancing and maybe self-quarantining, and just ways that we can work on improving our health right now. So without further ado, Dr. Mike, what's up?
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. Greatly appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. So we've talked before in our Facebook group, but I'm sure we've had some new members since then. So what's your background? Just like a quick maybe minute summary of all of the schooling that you've been through.
Yeah. So I've done 18 years of college, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. I did a Bachelor of Arts in Natural Science as my undergrad, did a master's in mechanical engineering and biomechanics, and then did 5 years in a PhD program in biomedical engineering. I dropped out of that and then went over to exercise physiology. So I did my PhD there in exercise physiology, metabolic flexibility and heart rate variability. And right now I teach for Rocky Mountain University, Georgia Southern Online, and I'm a faculty member at the Carrick Institute. And also primarily work with clients online, some in-person testing in Minnesota, not right now, but when I'm home and things of that nature. And yeah, I have an online certification for fitness trainers, which is just the Flex Diet certification, flexdiet.com.
That's awesome. And an avid kiteboarder.
Yes, I love kiteboarding, which unfortunately our trips for April have been canceled. So far we'll see what happens. But I highly doubt we're going anywhere for a while. But hopefully maybe we'll make it out in May or June, or who knows. In theory, we should be out in Hood River in July, but who knows right now.
Where were you planning on going?
South Padre.
Yeah.
So we usually drive down there, and then we usually hit up PaleoFX and visit some friends in Dallas and Austin, drive down, visit some relatives in Oklahoma City, hang out in South Padre. We're going to be there for about 2 weeks, do PaleoFX on the way back, visit some more friends, and then do the fitness summit, and then get back home. But all those events have been canceled, so we're here at home.
did they postpone PaleoFX to like July?
Yeah, technically I think PaleoFX has been postponed till July. The fitness summit has been tentatively postponed maybe till August. They don't have an official date yet. So it's hard because everything is up in the air, and who knows if July will change, and technically we won't be there as of now in July for PaleoFX, but I don't know.
This it's affecting everything. It's crazy. What were you gonna present on at PaleoFX?
So PaleoFX, I submitted a talk on the best pre-workout, which is a combination of caffeine and collagen. If you're doing a low-carb diet, maybe MCT, although the research on that's kind of split in terms of energy production. And so that was my talk.
So you said the best pre-workout: caffeine, collagen, and maybe MCT?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're using carbohydrates, I'd throw carbohydrates in there too. So
like some dextrose or something, or
dextrose. I mean, I use Vitargo once in a while, but you could use bananas or dates or other food too. If you haven't had a meal in a while, having some form of proteins can be beneficial too.
Yeah. So what's the basis for the collagen? Is it specifically for like joint support? Like, because I remember talking to you before, and you mentioned that like after a stimulus, if you have, there's like a window for collagen uptake after
Correct.
Stimulus.
Boom. Yeah, that's from good job, man. That's a good memory. It's from Dr. Keith Barr's lab. They've done some interesting stuff. It's primarily an ex vivo model, but they gave people 15 grams of collagen, a small amount of vitamin C, and then they had them do some resistance training exercise. I think they might have even had jumping rope as one of them. I have to double check. And after 60 minutes of exercise, they found that remodeling of soft tissue was more beneficial in the case of collagen or other markers that are associated with that. Now, we don't know if you talk to them, is it beneficial after? Maybe. The theory is that given before, because we know soft tissue is very avascular, it's not a lot of blood flow to it, maybe a blood flow issue, or maybe it's because the tissue has been kind of triggered from the loading, that it's more able to adapt a little bit faster. But yeah, pretty interesting. So people are using collagen for enhancing soft tissue. The data we have right now would say before exercise, 40 to 60 minutes, 15-gram dose, maybe a small amount of vitamin C is probably the best idea.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, now people who miss PaleoFX got it all filled in.
I know, they got it all there, good to go. Yeah, add a little caffeine to it, and yeah. Woo-hoo.
Yeah. How many milligrams of caffeine are you talking? Like a cup? Like
so in coffee, the hard part with coffee is it varies widely. So there was a study from, I think it was McCusker, that sent a grad student to get daybreak coffee from Starbucks every day for, I think it was 5 days in a row. And they just ran the caffeine content. So same store, same location, about the same time, same coffee. Right? And so Starbucks in general is known for having very consistent quality from one store to the next because it's a big franchise.
Yeah.
And the caffeine varied by, I want to say, like well over 150%. So pretty high variation.
Wow.
Like much higher than you would think, right? Especially for having all those things be the same. Right. So now if you're talking to someone who's using different brewing methods, different types of beans, everything else, it's kind of across the board. So yeah. I think you can use caffeine. Anecdotally, the Starbucks Via packets appear to be standardized pretty tightly. My buddy Dr. Lonnie Lowry has done some analysis on that, or it hasn't been published yet, but the Via packets appear to be pretty standardized. I use some stuff from Stronger Coffee Company. They have a product that they actually use instant coffee in, but they standardize it for caffeine. So they'll standardize it for around a 200 milligram caffeine dose, which is pretty cool. Most people, I would tell them if they're using anhydrous caffeine or caffeine tablets, I would say just start at 100 and then maybe go up by 50 milligrams and see kind of what you feel.
Yeah.
Most people are probably going to be 200 to 300 milligram range. If you look at the research, research could be even higher than that. It's probably 2 to 6 mgs per kg. So if you're a 220-pound mammal, you're about 100 kilograms. That could be up to a 600 milligram dose for changes in speed and power. And that's a pretty hefty dose.
Yeah.
So it's going to vary a lot person to person. I find most people see a pretty big benefit at 200 to 300, but sometimes if it's an all-out competition and it's an advanced power lifter and you're a bigger mammal, that may be 500 or 600 milligrams actually.
Yeah. But for let's say the average person in our gym is just, kind of working out three to 4 times a week, going to a morning workout, maybe, 100 milligrams of caffeine, some 15 grams of collagen, see how they feel, and then kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I would go with that. Even then, I'm not a huge fan of people using pre-workouts before every gym session. I'm a bigger fan of what I call kind of prioritized training. So figure out, okay, out of all your goals, like this is my main number one goal. I'm going to train that thing on Monday. I usually like pushing it closer to the beginning of the week, so most people have time to relax on the weekend. Maybe then use things like higher amounts of caffeine at that time, just trying to prioritize your main training effect.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a little bit better idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are your thoughts on the whole fasted cardio thing? Because I know that's a prescription that you've recommended before, maybe not necessarily for weight loss, but for your metabolic flexibility ideas, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea because when you're doing lower to moderate intensity cardio, you're actually trying to use fat primarily as a fuel, and it's not really utterly performance-based either. So I like having, I try to get up in the morning, do some type of fasted work on the rower. I think most days. I mean, in Costa Rica, I did it every day except for one. I might have missed one day possibly. I think it was the day I had to present. And I think that's a good idea, and it adds up over time. For some people, that could just be, get up and do a fasted walk. It doesn't even have to be on a piece of equipment per se. But yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I don't think body composition wise you're going to see a massive difference. I think it'll help, but just for general health, aerobic health, just I find I feel a lot better. I don't really get to the point where I'm like, oh boy, I get to do cardio on the rower today. It doesn't really get me excited, but I feel much better having done even just 6 to 10 minutes, which isn't really that much.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of people who are new to kind of your work on metabolic flexibility and maybe new to the, I don't know, paying more attention to the nutrition side of things, what's a quick summary of the idea of metabolic flexibility and maybe like a quick way to start to implement these ideas in a daily flow of life?
Yeah. The metabolic flexibility is how well can you use carbohydrates on one end of the spectrum, and then how well can you use fat on the other end of the spectrum, right? Because in fitness, worlds, as you've been around a lot for quite a while, everyone's like, oh, fat is like the best fuel ever. And then like, no, carbohydrates are the best fuel ever. And now it seems like protein is bad. And I don't know, there's always something. And the reality is it just depends on the context. Like, what are you trying to do? Right. So us just, chilling out, having this conversation, fat's probably going to be a better fuel. We don't need anything to do high intensity stuff. But if you were to go to your gym and do a 2,000 meter on the rower, yeah, having some carbohydrates is definitely going to be beneficial for that. Or doing some type of, CrossFit type WOD, Metcon, things of that nature, weightlifting. We definitely want those to be fueled more by carbohydrates. So It depends on the context of what you're trying to do. How well can you use carbohydrates for high intensity work? How well can you use fat for lower intensity work? And then how well can you actually switch back and forth between those two?
Got it.
I like doing the fasted work in the morning. You're upregulating a little bit more use of fat. And then if you have a little bit more carbohydrates the rest of the day, I think that's probably fine. Doing some type of weight training stuff in the afternoon. And yeah, so I think most people kind of probably overcomplicate it a little bit, and there's multiple different ways you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. But in your flex diet protocol, you sort of, you establish a series of priorities that starts with the easiest to implement and perhaps most effective, and then works down to things that are more difficult to implement and more effective. So like, for example, the first intervention you have is protein, right? Like consume enough protein, because that enhances just the feeling of being full. It promotes muscle protein synthesis. And so, like your general approach to nutrition is like effective and easy to implement intervention. So, like you see all these diets online and nutritionists that try to make this extremely complicated. And when I started to listen to a lot of the stuff that you were putting out about metabolic flexibility, you take this pretty intense, biochemical processes of the way everything works, and distill it down into like relatively easy to implement advice. And I think that that's the mark of like probably just really understanding what's going on.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted, especially for trainers or people who are fitness enthusiasts, is you do something that's accurate, right? So you can describe the big picture of what's going on, and then can you have interventions like protein and things where you learn about an hour of what it is, and then translate that into actual specific actions. So if you like math, maybe take your body weight times 0.7, and that gives you about your number of grams of total protein per day, right? Or if you don't like math, maybe you are a male and you're a little bit bigger, so you just take 4 meals to hit 40 grams of protein per meal, probably going to be just fine, right? So there's different ways to take the information and then scale it down so that the actions you're doing are relatively easy. Obviously going to take work to implement, but they're actually the correct ones for where you're at too.
Yeah. So if you're if you're just a normal, I'm not talking like a Matt Fraser competitive CrossFit type person, just a normal CrossFitter working out 3 times a week, the metabolic difference between your workout days and your non-workout days is obviously pretty different. So your non-workout days, you don't necessarily need as much of the carbohydrate fueling source because you're not doing any of that high intensity work. So how might the diet differ between a rest day or like an active recovery day versus a day where you're going and doing CrossFit?
Yeah, I would say for that person, the easiest way is just kind of like the old school zigzag method, right? Have a little bit higher carbohydrates on the days you're going to train, lower carbohydrates on the days you're not. I mean, difference in carbohydrates, you're looking at, yeah, maybe 40 grams, 50 grams, maybe is probably the difference of where I would have people start. Obviously, they can all start at different levels. But I've done that a fair amount with people, and that seems to work pretty good. If you get too hyper aggressive and you just drop their carbs to like 80 per day, people don't feel very good and their training performance starts to tank. But most people there are probably training for body composition too. So you don't want them to be eating like 500 grams of carbohydrates a day either. It's like, oh, my performance is great, but I gained like 3 pounds last week. Right. So you're kind of walking a little bit of that tightrope to find the spot where, oh, performance is good. I went and did the gym. It feels pretty good. Oh, nice. Body comp's getting a little bit better at the same time.
Yeah. 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 The way that I internalized a recommendation, and you tell me if this is on the right track or not, is I kind of have my standard day like worth of eating, and I like my non-workout day, lots of salad, lots of vegetables, some protein to match the numbers that you said before. And then on days when I'm more physically active, I'll throw in an additional carbohydrate, usually something a little starchy, in the meal before or after the workout, whatever makes sense for the day. And so I kind of eat relatively consistently. I just add a little bit more on workout days.
Yeah, no, I think that's like bang on. I mean, what I tell people, especially CrossFit kind of paleo people, I'm like, yeah, take your baseline, right, which looks, a little bit low carby kind of thing if your goal is body comp. And we don't know any data about you or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then exactly what you said, like the meal before you train, let's say you go to a early evening class at 4 or something like that. Just add a sweet potato to that meal and add another sweet potato to the meal after you're done. Like you're
Yeah.
going to get pretty close, right? You're having enough carbs a little bit before, got a little bit after. I mean, as a ballpark recommendation, you're going to be pretty close with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I generally respond well to the idea of trying to figure out what a good day is, like
Yes.
in terms of a nutritional model, and then just try to replicate that so my energy levels are steady, that there's not these crazy cycles. And I find if I can just tweak on that based on deviations from my default day, so if it's a day where I did a ton of working out, I might throw in more carbs, or if it's a day where I was just super lazy, a little less. Or maybe there's a day where I'm just doing a lot of stuff on my computer, you know maybe it's mentally demanding but it's not necessarily physically demanding, so I might have some more carbs to that. Who knows?
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, that's the end goal that I want people to get to is exactly what you said, is that they're able to kind of auto regulate on their own. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm still getting closer to my goals and I'm feeling good and all my markers, everything's going in the right direction. And they're not following a super strict plan because they're definitely more on the advanced end of the spectrum. Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and for people who are interested in learning more about the flex diet and metabolic flexibility, you have it's an 8-week course. It's a
Yep,
10
8
week
modules,
8
correct.
modules. Yeah, so an 8-module course that literally walks you through 8 interventions that systematically kind of implement these ideas of metabolic flexibility. I think it's designed for coaches, but I think anyone who goes through it is going to learn a lot. If you're just going through it for yourself, you're going to learn a ton personally. So it's in that regard, it's kind of like the CrossFit L1, where it's technically designed for coaches, but as an athlete, if you go through the L1, you're going to gain a ton. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, we designed it primarily for trainers and coaches, but right now, I mean, the last split I looked at was almost like 50-50,
Oh, cool.
trainers, coaches, and fitness enthusiasts, which was a little bit higher than I expected, to be 100% honest, but
Yeah.
the feedback's all been like super good on it. And yeah, exactly what you said. I wanted a way of taking stuff like protein, fats, carbohydrates, fasting, sleep, micronutrition, exercise, NEAT, how much you walk around, recreation, and how do you put all those nutrition recovery interventions into one system where you learn about them so you know what to do, and then it has the specific action items for it. People are interested, they can just go to www.flexdiet.com, FLEXDIET, com.
Yeah, and it's a great program. I went through that. I went through the. I think I was one of the first people to go through the course.
You're one of the very first.
Woo
Yes.
woo.
Woo.
Yeah, and then so I went through the course, and then I enrolled in a Master's of Science for Clinical Nutrition,
Yeah.
and it's pretty nuts because I'm certainly learning more stuff in the nutrition
Sure.
program, but really what I'm learning is that everything that you taught in that course is totally right.
That's good. I'm glad it matches.
Yeah, I find myself going back to your lectures and like pulling references and resources and then using those
Oh, cool.
references in my research. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, so for those of you who want to take the next step towards your better understanding of food, and I think the thing that I like the most about the course is you systematically teach people about the food so that they can be informed to make their own decisions. It's not just do this and follow this blindly. It's literally making someone a better, more aware person. It's like what I tell people in the gym is, you hire us, you pay a coach to accelerate the results that you get. It's my job to teach you everything I know as quickly as possible, and I'm continuing to learn every day. So like we've got to get to work because there's a lot I got to get into your brain. So I think your approach to that is very similar, and it's very cool.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted something how it's divided. Each module has a big picture that talks about metabolic flexibility and flexible dieting. And that kind of iterates over the course of the 8 modules. And then with each intervention, there's a 1 hour kind of more technical thing that says, okay, everything you had to know about protein from the research, here it is. And then each one has 5 specific action items. So you have the context, you have the more detailed subject matter, and then you have the specific things that you would do either for yourself or for a person in your gym if you're a trainer or a coach.
Yeah.
And because I think that without the context, like my buddy Ben House has said this, people are pretty dangerous, right? If you're convinced that keto is the answer to everything, you're kind of dangerous, right? Because there's some things that may not work for. Some things it's absolutely great for,
Right.
right? So you need to know that context and that big picture, but still have the granularity of like, oh, okay, here's what I actually do with the client.
Yeah. Yeah. And without giving away your whole course, another aspect of it that I really appreciated and, through the course of the nutritional program I'm in has realized it's even more and more and more important with everything I learn is the idea of multiple colors into your diet through the vegetables.
Sure. Yes.
That's something Rachel, one of our coaches, went through your program as well. And that was an
Oh,
intervention
cool.
that she talked about earlier in the week, which is 2 colors 2 times per week for the 5 major colors in the food group. And that's going to expose
Yeah,
you
nice.
to all of the phytochemical complexity that can come with food and force a lot of variety. And that's really important, but I'm curious your thoughts on maybe a few details as to why.
Yeah, because that was one of those things where like every time you turn around, there's like some new magical super fruit or food or whatever. And yeah, some of those can be beneficial, but they're always usually generally just kind of overhyped, right? So someone's looking for a magical Amazonian fruit that's picked by 2 pygmies under a blue moon with piranhas stuck to their ass to solve all their like nutritional ills. And it's like, maybe you should just eat more like colorful things. That might be a real quick and dirty approach, which you've probably done too, is look at their nutrition log. And I used to do this before I put them online. I just look for colors.
Yeah.
It's like, you haven't eaten a green thing in like a whole week. Like, I can almost guarantee you're deficient in magnesium. I mean, I could say that anyway, because most people are deficient in magnesium. But,
Right.
So I think by spreading out the colors, you get, kind of the basic things we know about. But as you mentioned, you also get a lot of the phytonutrients and the things that were probably not even discovered yet. Like what friggin' broccoli has like 300 different probably polyphenols and compounds in it that we probably don't even really know exactly yet. So you also then hedge your bets away from things that may be higher in more certain contaminants or maybe anti-nutrients, which is a whole nother debate. But if you're having a wide variety of stuff and you're feeling good and your digestion is fine, you're also kind of hedging your bets away from things that you may be getting too much of also.
Yep. Yeah, and if you can eat colorfully seasonally from your
Sure.
local market, I think that that would even continue to put you in harmony with the cycles of nature. And I think
Yeah.
if you're getting food a lot closer to the source of where it's grown, there's less nutrient decay. I don't know if that's a real term. I just sort of didn't make up the concept, but there's a stronger nutrient density to food that's freshly picked than after it's been sitting on the shelf for a week, right?
Oh, definitely. Right. And even look at tomatoes, right? I remember it was like a year, 2 years ago, where my wife bought some tomatoes, and I'm like, I said, "What? Where did you buy these things? They taste horrible. Like they don't even taste like a freaking tomato." And it was one of
Yeah,
these kind of cheap stores that buys a massive amount of stuff in bulk and probably ethylene ripened and all that stuff. And it's not bad. I mean, the fact you're eating a tomato is probably better than no tomato.
yeah,
But we were used to, getting the vine ripened ones that were more, locally produced and stuff too. So you can even notice sometimes a taste difference from it. An environmental impact. Obviously, I think supporting more local farmers, less transportation costs, all that stuff is definitely a win.
yeah, yeah. Cool. So a lot of people are kind of stuck in their homes or engaged in this social distancing during this time of the COVID shutdown. So, what can some people what should people be doing nutritionally to boost their immune system or just promote optimal health so that their body is as prepared as possible for any sort of negative situation that might enter their 6 foot sphere?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, all the standard stuff that people have heard before that the CDC has put out, social distancing, make sure you wash your hands. I mean, it kind of goes without saying that those are going to be by far and away probably the biggest things that are going to make the biggest difference. Most places in the U.S. now are pretty isolated for the most part. Um, you can check with your local legislation, but most places still allow for you to go outside. So I watched the governor here in Minnesota had an announcement the other day, and so we'll be on official lockdown in another day. But even then, he very rightfully pointed out that yes, we want to stay away from other people, but that doesn't mean you can never go outside your house. He's like, we want people to go outside, take a walk. If you can do some exercise outside, definitely do it. Obviously, don't congregate in big groups, things of that nature, because that small amounts of exercise, as long as you're not overextending your body and movement, all those things are beneficial from body composition to mental health to immune system function. So just getting up and moving around, because I think people also forget that if you're confined sort of to your house, like I'm looking today, like I've been doing calls literally since this morning.
Oh,
I'm at 681 steps so far today,
oh
which is
no.
horrible, right? Which it'll be all right. I'll get to walk around later and that kind of stuff. And I did a little bit of a row this morning. But I think people forget that if you're not going outside your normal environment, like how much your movement just drops off like really fast. So you may have to actively, if you can, take 2 walks a day maybe, or just get some more movement. I did a call this morning for some training, and a couple people there run treadmill desks at the same time, so getting some movement inside when they're doing meetings. So that's definitely, it's a big thing, and it's also very good for mental health, right? There's some very interesting data on aerobic training related to BDNF, so brain derived neurotrophic factor, hippocampal volume, so a certain area in your brain being better. So I think aerobic training is good for that. Weight training, you're seeing all sorts of crazy body weight type training and stuff now. Obviously beneficial if you can do it. Just like all things, start a little bit slower. Don't get injured. Don't decide to do 200 push-ups a day if you've only done one push-up in the past year.
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit much for where you're at, but try a couple here and there. In terms of nutrition, some of that may be limited on what you can get in terms of what's available. So where we're at, I mean, granted we can still get food, but we ordered a delivery service from Costco on Tuesday, and I think it gets here Sunday. So just FYI, there may be more delays in what you can find. I talked to some other people that sometimes farmers markets may still be open, so you have to check with local listings and what you can. I was joking with a buddy that you go to the farmer's market, do you just yell cucumbers out your window and they just start chucking cucumbers in your car, or like what do they do? But
yeah,
if you can get access to some fresh produce and those things, I think that's a good idea. I would say probably just think before you buy and try not to overreact. If you're buying a bunch of food that you know is going to spoil in 2 weeks, then you probably don't need to go crazy on it. But some things will last for quite a while, like potatoes and onions. You can wrap them up in a dark container, put them somewhere that's a little bit cool. I mean, we do that. We bought a bunch of potatoes from a farmer that my mom knows. I want to say she bought 100 pounds potatoes, I think, from them.
dang.
And so we've been getting like 20-pound bags of potatoes from them. But I mean, if you keep them, cool and you keep them dark, they'll keep for several months at a time very easily.
Yeah.
In terms of vegetables without refrigeration stuff, apples will keep for quite a while. But other stuff people know are more perishable, such as, bananas, things like that. You probably don't need to buy 3 bunches of them because they're not going to keep very long. But just kind of think about what you can keep ahead of time. Citrus, like lemons and limes, will keep for quite a while in a crisper drawer. So if you're looking for natural sources of vitamin C, those can be pretty good. Obviously, refrigeration helps a fair amount. Another tip we did too is we bought a bunch of spinach, and you can just take the whole container and drop it in your freezer. And if you need to steam it at that point, you can't really notice too much of a difference. We've been putting it in veggie shakes in the morning.
Yeah.
And ironically, like the spinach, if it's been frozen, cuts up really well because it gets brittle and actually fractures in the blender. So it actually gets a little bit smoother.
Yeah.
So some other tricks like that.
That's cool. So just, outside of just trying to eat as healthy as possible, there's no like crazy immune boosting superfood that is coming to mind?
Not really. I mean, vitamin C can help with the immune system, but again, most of the data, 500 to maybe 1,000 milligrams per day, and that's probably on the high end, and that's might help reduce severity of colds a little bit, right? In terms of highly specific information as regarding the COVID-19, there just really isn't any because no one's really tested anything. So anything is just an assumption based off of things that may have antiviral properties. There's some pretty good data on like reishi mushroom extracts can help with immune system function. I mean, that's something I've just used off and on, especially when I travel a fair amount.
Yeah.
Different types of mushrooms may be beneficial for that. A good one that most people may not realize that they probably have in their house already is garlic.
Yep.
So garlic has a compound in it, and what you need to do to make the allicin active is take little cloves of garlic, run it through a garlic press or cut it up really small, and then leave it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. So those compounds are basically made when the garlic reacts with the oxygen in the air. So they need to leave it sit out for about 10 to 15 minutes once it's been cut up or crushed.
Got it. Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. And that's just a general antiviral. Again, do we have any data on this particular one? No, but maybe might be beneficial. Other things too that people tend to forget about is sleep, right? Melatonin is a good antioxidant for just general health. Again, theoretical, but maybe beneficial with that. As we mentioned, vitamin C. If people are deficient in zinc, there's some data on zinc that can be beneficial for immune system. Magnesium and zinc, if you were to pick deficiencies in minerals, probably a little bit higher at the top of the list. Again, even with those, it doesn't mean that if you are sufficient in zinc that you take a bunch more, that you're going to have immune boosting properties. Probably not. Right, as you know, if you take too much zinc, you can start depleting out copper, and you can end up with other issues related to that.
Yep.
So those can help. Vitamin D can help if you are deficient. Obviously, getting outside if you can is a great way. But as of this recording, even in Minnesota, we're starting to get a little bit more sunlight, but we're still at a pretty north latitude, so not getting a ton of it.
Yeah.
In that case, vitamin D as a supplement could be beneficial too.
Yeah, and coming out of winter, most people are at their lowest vitamin D point
Right.
in the annual cycle. So
Yep.
that combined with the fact that the virus is going around and now we're locked indoors when the weather starts to turn is something to really pay attention to.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And the data we have shows that if you're deficient in vitamin D, that could be an issue related to immune system function. It doesn't mean that I need to hyperdose vitamins D to go above and beyond that. Obviously, if you can get a test 25 hydroxy through your physician, which is a surrogate marker of vitamin D, in my opinion, you probably want to be 50 to maybe 70 in terms of US units on that, which is on the
Yep.
higher side. Again, you don't want to be like super high on that either.
Yeah. Do you have a preferred form of vitamin D supplementation? I've heard some people talk about liquid forms being more assimilable,
Yeah,
but
I haven't seen anything on that. I mean,
yeah.
D is obviously fat soluble, right? So A, D, E, and K are fat soluble. Taking it with a meal probably going to be a good idea. If I take it, I will take it in the morning. There hasn't been much study on the chronobiology effect of D, but my guess is we may see some data related to that. I know some people take it before bed, which again, probably going to be a benefit. But if you think about how D is primarily generated, it's through the sun, and
Right.
sunlight exposure is going to be higher in the morning, afternoon time, going to be less in the evening. I don't know if anyone's really looked at maybe you've seen some stuff on the chronobiology effect of supplemental vitamin D, but I just kind of hedge my bets and take it more during the day and usually with a meal that has a little bit of fat.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there any benefit from natural vitamin D through sun exposure and supplemental, or is it just kind of all the same? As long as you're
Uh,
taking that, like what's active form D3?
Yeah, so D3 is what is probably best in terms of a supplement, right? So D3 is what you can get over the counter. D3 is sort of your body's reserve pool that it's going to pull from. D2 is actually more metabolically active, but the half-life is very, very short.
Mm.
Right now, synthetic D2 is still a prescription. There is a supplement on the market that uses high amounts of D2 in mushrooms. So I've always wondered, like Eskimos and people like in northern Finland and Scandinavian countries, it's like what the heck did they do to not have massive like rickets and like a D deficiency? And one of the things they did was they would take mushrooms and they would dry them in the sun. And when you take the mushroom and you expose it to UV light, you actually can make a D2. So they would take these dried mushrooms and they would use them in soups and stuff over the course of the winter. So even though D2 has a pretty short half-life, I want to say less than 24 hours, but if you're consuming a fair amount of it and regular with high frequency, probably can be enough to offset your D stores in a long winter where you can't get enough sun exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been kind of interesting too. And then the other part is if you are really deficient, so if you have a blood test for 25 hydroxy and find that you're really low, it does appear to take a pretty darn high dose of D3 to get back into the range. So Veith published some data back in the 90s that the curve kind of looks like this. And if you're really deficient and you're taking like 1,000 IUs a day, you just never get to that steep part of the curve. So for some people who are deficient, under the guise of guidance of their physician, 5,000 IUs a day or more is really not that crazy for a short period of time. Again, I would want some blood work to see where they're at on that and check that out.
Yeah.
There's some theoretical stuff that sunlight is better. I would say maybe, as I haven't looked at a whole lot of data with that. Some anecdotal reports of people who were taking high dose D3 and couldn't get their levels back to normal, went out in the sun and the levels normalized. So maybe, but I haven't seen too much data on that. I think sunlight obviously has a lot of other benefits. So if you can get out, see the sun, not get burned, I think there's a lot of benefits with that. Maybe a little tricky now or in the off season, and then using D3 as a supplement can be a good idea.
Yeah. the other thing I heard when it comes to sunlight is that you need kind of a 15 to 20-minute dose to actually get the metabolic breakdown um, to start the reaction. Like less than 15 minutes is kind of not enough to trigger any sort of vitamin D synthesis. Is that
Hmm.
malarkey?
I haven't seen anything on that, to be honest. I don't know why the kinetics would be that delayed.
Yeah,
Don't know. Yeah, that seems a little weird to me, but I don't have any direct data against that because that would imply that there's a threshold effect somewhere. And from what
yeah,
I've seen, it appears to be kind of not a linear response, but as soon as your skin is reacting with that, it's producing some D. Now, again, that depends more on the angle of the sun and how much basically light and UV is coming through, from what I've
yeah.
seen.
And
Pigment makes a big difference too, right? You have
what
dark
does?
pigment or light
Oh,
pigment,
yeah, yeah, for
skin
sure.
pigment color.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And then, yeah, you mentioned intensity of the sun. One thing I've heard is that if the shadows, if the shadow's shorter than you are tall, then the sun's, like in the prime range, and
Oh,
that
that's a
seems
good
to
one.
be most effective. So,
Yeah, yeah. Because in the morning you're going to have more of the kind of the red light spectrum from the sun. UV is going to be very, very minimal. Again, that has some benefits, I think, for circadian rhythm and some other stuff. But later in the day is going to be when the sun is more overhead, better
yeah,
for vitamin D. Obviously, stronger sun rays.
yeah, that's cool. Any other kind of supplements or things that you're thinking about when uh, people are kind of holed up like they are now?
Yeah, I mean, the only other one that I've done that I can't find that much data on is I'll take like 2 or 3 or 4 drops of oregano and I'll kind of gargle with that. Again, I haven't found a lot of direct data that says that there's any beneficial effect to it, but anecdotally it seems to help, but who knows why.
And you're
I haven't
looking
seen
for that.
anything that there's a negative with that, especially at smaller doses. Bigger doses, you can see some interference possibly with gut health or killing off some of the other little critters down there. But yeah, I don't know if you've seen anything on that.
No, I mean, but you're just looking for like the what antiviral properties of oil of oregano?
Yeah, a little antiviral, antiseptic.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's a hypothetical jump is that the current one is respiratory, right? So maybe targeting gargling and swallowing that may help, but who knows? That's
yeah,
me crawling way out on the end of the tree limb.
yeah. Well, if you believe it, then the placebo effect is real. So,
Yeah, and I don't see like for that small of a dose that there's a big downside either. But again, I can't point to any direct testing.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
anything you've seen?
in terms of supplements,
Yeah.
I've so I'm part of my program is concentration in Western herbal medicine. So I've just been playing
Oh,
around with it.
cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've been playing around with making just a ton of tinctures. So I have a reishi tincture. I made a a brain cocktail. I don't know. I
Hmm.
just I took every I kind of took every adaptogen and stimulant and thing that was ever connected to brain performance and just threw it in a massive tincture and I just bottled it and I've been taking it. Let me hold on. Let me grab it. Yeah. So I call it brain gains.
Yeah.
And it's got American ginseng, rhodiola, ashwagandha, and lion's mane
Oh,
mushroom.
cool.
Yeah, so I was taking rhodiola a lot, and I found that it was like something good to take kind of in the morning, to just like a little herbal stimulant. And then American ginseng and ashwagandha adaptogens that just sort of like help you kind of deal with stress a little better. And then I listened to a lot of Paul Stamets on Joe Rogan talk about the neurative regenerative effects of lion's
Yeah.
mane.
Hmm.
So anyway, it's like this. Oh, and I put matcha in there. I don't know why. I just had some lying around. So it's this kind of
Oh,
like
nice.
this like
Oh, wow.
dark green. Tastes like absolute garbage, but whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
So I don't know. I don't know if it's doing anything. I didn't put a ton of research into it. I just kind of like was exposed to a lot of these herbs and was taking them, and I just was playing around with tinctures. So I'm doing that. That's all. That's really all I'm doing. And I have reishi that I should be taking after you mentioned that might be good.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some pretty good immune data on that. Obviously, people want to make sure they're getting actual real reishi. There's a study in Nature a while ago that some of the ones out there are probably not super high quality. So just
Yeah,
FYI on that.
yeah. That like mushroom supplements and CBD supplements. I've
Yep.
researched a lot that they're just you gotta be real confident with your sourcing on some of those.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and those are also ones that have a very high price point.
Hmm.
And if people aren't checking what's actually in there, if your ethics are not very good and you want to try to get in and make money by hosing people, you're probably going to target things that have a high price point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a lecture I think you might have done that cited like 70% of CBD supplementations contain less than their advertised amount, and like 23% don't contain any at all, something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact stats. Like I'd have to look again, but there's for CBD even older studies showing that they were higher in THC than what they should be. Some that they tested, there was nothing CBD even in the friggin' bottle. And then plus, if you just look around at how much has exploded in the last year and a half, and then you go all the way back and you trace it to how many people were actually making, legit crops that could extract CBD at a, reasonable price point and all the infrastructure that goes into it. You just, my back of the envelope calculation is that a lot of it's just got to be fraud. It's just got
Yeah.
to be fake. Like the numbers don't add up. And again, I'm not an expert on the economics of it, and maybe it's a little bit better now, but yeah. And then with CBD stuff, a lot of the cost is in the background stuff. It's in the testing and making sure you file the right paperwork and what extraction points are you doing and what type of extraction method are you doing and all this stuff that if you just put green shit in the bottle, you don't have to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well,
Cool, man.
Dr. Mike, appreciate your time. For those of you who want to follow Dr. Mike, he's got a mailing list and you can get there through flexdiet.com.
Yeah, so I think flexdiet.com should send you to the waitlist there for that. And then the main site is just miketnelson.com. If you go to miketnelson.com, just go to the top there and you'll be able to get on the newsletter for free and we'll send you a whole bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah, and you send emails, I don't want to say every day, but like probably 2-3 times a week.
Oh no, it's almost daily. It's
Okay.
probably six days a weekish, probably somewhere around there.
Perfect.
So,
And they're really informative stuff too. So,
oh, thank you.
yeah, like I think a lot of times people get on these email lists and it's like, Jesus, stop emailing me.
Yeah.
And, I have yours go to a folder and then every few days I'll just go through and read through them all. And, that's kind of how I keep in touch with what you're studying and what you're learning, and you pass it right on to us. So I feel like just following along, things that come up in my school, I feel like you were talking about a year ago.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, it's really interesting for those of you who are like, new to nutrition and everything. Like Dr. Mike is definitely the cutting edge of this stuff. So get on his newsletter, read what he's got to say, follow his advice, take his course. And, we're going to announce some more stuff inside the gym here in the next few days, but we're going to offer some flex diet type nutrition.
Yay, that's awesome.
Ideas. Yeah, for sure. We're going to ramp that up here probably starting on Monday. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Sweet.
we're pretty excited for that. So anyway, this is the brain. This is the guy where it all came from. So hopefully we can do this again soon, and appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I really appreciate it and good to talk to you as always.
Cool.